Nigeria, it's more of memorization. You know, they give you a concept, they ask you, okay, you have to give it to me the way I said it to you. So if they say, okay, define education, for instance, right? They want you to say it word for word. So it was a lot of memorization. But here, it's more so say it in your own words. What do you think about this? Which was quite different. And that's where a lot of people kind of run into plagiarism. Not really, but not really copying because they don't want to do the work, but just because of the learning environment that they came from. So there was an issue that I had with an English class, and the lecturer told me that, okay, it's not really plagiarism, but you're close to it or you're tending towards it. And I really had to learn and unlearn a couple of things there. So I would say that's also something that I think international students face in general. So my name is Ayomide Tubi. I'm a Nigerian and Canadian, so I would say best of both worlds. And I grew up in Ibadan, Nigeria, to be precise. I came here in Canada in 2015 as an international student. But I would say my journey actually began 3 years before in 2012, which was when I graduated from high school. I graduated and I wanted to go to university immediately, but my parents wanted me to do a one-year A-level program in Ibadan, which is where I grew up in, which I wasn't too comfortable with or didn't want to do, but I didn't really have much of a choice. So I decided, okay, I would do the program and then 1 year I would use that year to apply for schools. I initially wanted to go to the US. I just loved US schools and I had been to the US before. So I went to Lagos, a different city, because they had an Education USA program. I did a lot of research and I had a list of 22 schools or so that I was going to apply to, and I applied to all of them because I was also trying to get a full scholarship. Schooling in the US is quite expensive. After the year, I only got into 2 schools, and they were kind of the 2 schools which were at the bottom of my list, and I didn't get a scholarship. So that was quite disappointing for me. I then decided, okay, I'm going to wait 1 year and I'm going to apply again. My brother, my eldest brother, he was already here in Canada. He had graduated from the University of Windsor, and he spoke to me. He said, okay, you know, come to Canada. And I decided to shift my focus from the US to Canada. I applied to about 5 or 6 schools here. I got into all of them, and I chose the University of Alberta, U of A, to study chemical engineering. And I did that because it has a really good engineering program. Also, the province of Alberta is good for the oil and gas industry. And I got a scholarship, well, not a full scholarship, but a scholarship of $9,500. However, we weren't able to afford the rest of the fees, so I couldn't come, and that was very disappointing for me, and I had to wait back another year. So that was my second year. I asked the U of A to defer my decision, but they said no. So I lost that opportunity and I had to apply again. So third year at home, I did the application again. I got into U of A. I only applied to 1 school at this point in time. I just said it had to work. I applied to the U of A. I got into the U of A. I got a scholarship, but it had reduced from $9,500, what I got the previous year, to $4,500. But that was okay because we were able to afford the rest of the fees. So I was very excited. And then I applied for my study permit. And I did the process myself, from all the school applications to my immigration application. I did everything from the beginning to the end. I told my parents the documents that I would need. They sent it to me. And then, yeah, I did the application in May, got it a few months later. And I came to Canada on the 20th of August, 2015. Yes, so it was quite challenging at first, I would say. adjusting to life here, I feel that because I had a gap year, right? I wasn't in school for 3 years. So a lot of concepts that I had learned in high school, I had forgotten. I got into the U of A, I did my first year of engineering, which was more so general subjects, chemistry, math, mechanics, English, and I couldn't remember a lot of things. So I was struggling in a physics class. I didn't understand what was going on. And then the prof said, if you're having any difficulties, come for my office hours. I'll explain it to you in more detail. So I did that. I went to his office hours and he was asking me some questions, and I honestly couldn't remember what it meant. I didn't have the right answers. And I told him, oh, I'm sorry, actually, I've just been out of school for a few years. I can't really remember a lot of the concepts that I've learned. And he looked me point blank and said I should go back to grade 12. Like, it was kind of lacking a lot of sympathy, a lot of empathy. He was just like, yeah, you're not gonna do well here. And he said I should go back to grade 12 to go learn. But obviously, he didn't know the journey, the 3-year journey that brought me there. So I wasn't gonna let that, deter me. I just put in a lot more effort to learn things that I had learned before. And I think I did pretty well. I graduated with distinction from the U of A. So that worked out really well without going back to grade 12. Yes, I would say also just adjusting to the learning environment here was a bit challenging, because in Nigeria, it's more of memorization. They give you a concept. They ask you, okay, you have to give it to me the way I said it to you. So if they say, okay, define education, for instance, right? They want you to say it word for word. So it was a lot of memorization. But here, it's more so say it in your own words. What do you think about this? Which was quite different. And that's where a lot of people kind of run into plagiarism. Not really copying because they don't want to do the work, but just because of the learning environment that they came from. So there was an issue that I had with an English class, and the lecturer told me that, okay, it's not really plagiarism, but you're close to it, or you're tending towards it. And I really had to learn and unlearn a couple of things there. So I would say that's also something that I think international students face in general. So I went through my 4 years at the U of A, University of Alberta, graduated, started working in the field. I switched to finance, and that's a story that I'm going to tell soon. But one of the major culture shocks for me was food. Food was a big thing. It was quite difficult to find meals that I enjoyed. I remember my first week here. So I came about 2 weeks before school started because U of A, they organize a program called Base Camp. So basically they get all first year students and they just orient you into the system, tell you about the different programs, basically get you settled before you actually start school. And they had mentioned that there was going to be a barbecue, and I was looking forward to it so much, because when I think of barbecue, at least in Nigeria, it's like a lot of suya, which is like peppered meat, and there's chicken, there's a lot to eat. So you really have a great time. So I was looking forward to it, also because I hadn't really eaten much during that week because I didn't really like the food. And I went there and they gave me sausage and bread. They gave me sausage and bread, and I think I cried. I think it was just like the whole emotion of settling into Canada, just because, I was quite disappointed. But I eventually adjusted and started eating what they serve here. Yeah, so that was a major one. Another culture shock for me was the weather. Definitely, I knew that it was going to be cold, but yeah, until you come here, that's when you really experience it. But it just wasn't about, how cold it was. It was just also, when it's winter here, you have shorter days. So it gets pretty dark around 5 p.m. So I would just get my winter jacket and just run to my hostel. And whenever I needed to go for class, I would go. I would always stay indoors. And I was, yeah, not very, my social life wasn't really active. It was just kind of school back home, or back to the dorm. And it was until April when we started transitioning to spring that I realized I was just happier. I was just happier. I didn't even realize how down I had been. So when people talk about like seasonal depression, I kind of understand that a bit, because I think it was something that I experienced but didn't even realize that I was experiencing it. So that also was a big thing. I would say movements / accommodation, transportation also was a bit tough. Living here as an international student here, it's like you're always on the go. You're moving from, you finish your school, you have to move off campus, or you have to pay for accommodation elsewhere. So it was just moving from different places, or to different places, which I didn't like. I prefer stability. So that was also something that I had to adjust to. Okay, so I had a lot of experiences, like a lot of memorable experiences. I would say, trips with friends. I would say I had my brother here, as I had mentioned, so I was literally his handbag. Anytime he would come to town, he would take me to places. He was here with his fiance, who is now his wife. So they really helped me in terms of just getting out of my shell. A lot of things that I wouldn't do, like rope courses. There was like this winter diving thing that I did. So that really helped. I remember there was a WWE match, and I grew up watching WWE, which is World Wrestling Entertainment, and they came to Edmonton. So a couple of us in university in our first year, we got tickets, and we went to go watch that. So that was nice. But I would say a very memorable one would be in my first semester, we had a project. It was an engineering project, and they asked us to pretty much build a pulley that would lift a weight off the ground. And a couple of Nigerian students, we all came together, we formed our group, which was a bad decision. It was a bad decision, because we then realized that we didn't even know where to get the tools that we needed to build this pulley. So we were asking people, they were like, oh, there's this store called Home Depot, which wasn't even close to campus. So it was a mess, to be quite honest. We had this friend, I don't know where to date, I don't even know where he got wood, but he just brought wood, and we made do with what we had. But you see, like other students here, people that were, Canadian born and bred, they just went back home, right? Or they went to a friend's house who lived here in Edmonton, and they built it in their backyard. So here in Canada, you have, if you have an issue in your house, a lot of people are more hands-on, right? You kind of just fix it by yourself. So they were already used to projects like that. But coming from Nigeria, forming a group of Nigerians for that project wasn't the best idea. So we learned from that. And then moving forward, we were like, okay, I think we should get, people, a more diversified group whenever we're doing projects. So that was good. I would say my biggest support, honestly, was church. When I came, my brother picked me up from the airport, and he had to go back because he lived in a different city. But he left me in the company of his friend, and I just went to her church, and I've been going there for the past 8 years since I've been here. It's really been a very stable community for me. It's a church of different nationalities, but I would say, the major nationality there, or most people there, are from Nigeria. You have people that moved here also, similar to my experience as an international student. And then you have people that were actually born, or their parents came here and they were born here and grew up here. So they were able to share my struggles. They understood what I was going through. They made so many provisions available. They would help us with transportation. They would cook Nigerian food, oh my goodness, and then they would bring it to us in the hostels, and we would eat. It really livened my spirits during school, and especially during winter, when I was feeling down, I would just be so excited to go to church, actually. So it was nice to have that community of support and that community of people behind me. Yeah. Yes, so I didn't join a lot of clubs or programs, but I would volunteer a little bit whenever we had maybe like an engineering get together. I would just volunteer for maybe a day or so and just meet a couple of people. And that really helped in terms of just making friends outside my normal circle. I also was part of like an academic and career group. And because of that, it involved like organizing seminars and programs and conferences. So just because of that, I had to interact with other people in that role. So in terms of meeting people who would like to invite for programs like that, and also meeting people who attended such programs. So that kind of helped me broaden my sphere of relationships. I would say one, I wouldn't call it a discrimination incident. I just think about it in terms of, okay, maybe ignorance. But anytime I would speak or when I came here and I would just be talking to someone or talking to people, they would ask me, oh, where are you from? And I would say Nigeria. And they'll be like, oh, how long have you been here? And I'm like, oh, I just came like last week or last month or 2 months ago. And they were like, oh, you speak good English. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, okay. So the first time it happened, I was like, thank you, because I kind of thought that, okay, they meant it as a compliment, but it kept on happening a lot of times, and it became quite irritating. So anytime someone would say that, I'll be like, yes, I'm from Nigeria. Actually, English is the official language in Nigeria. And just educating people about my culture, because I realized that a lot of Canadians here, I would say they don't really travel out much or know about the broader world, maybe just the US because, it's close by. But I just started educating them, okay, it is the official language in Nigeria. It's actually the official language in a couple of other countries, and just letting them know more about it. Cultural misunderstandings, I would say yes. I remember one of the expectations that I had was that I would build like a community of friends. I would have friends from different countries. And because of that, I decided that, okay, my first year I was going to have a roommate. So I chose to live in a two people occupied room, right? And have a roommate. So my roommate, she was Canadian. I met her. We actually bonded at first. But then a couple of things started to affect the relationship. She was a morning person. I was a late night person. And there's no way that my lights would be on and it wouldn't affect her. But I just had the lights kind of had to be on because I had things that I needed to do, right? I would try to stay in the library, but at some point I would still, have to come back to the room, right? So that was an issue. Also, Nigeria is a very community-based society. So I could have my friends over, my Nigerian friends in the room, would just be talking, would be gisting. And I realized she didn't really like that too much. She actually spoke to me about it. So I had to tell my friends not to come over too often and just like reduce it and come at certain times. But even with that, she actually ended up moving out of the room a few weeks later, maybe like a month and a bit after. So I wasn't too happy about that, but I just kind of had to move on and make do with what I had. Yeah. Yes. So during my university degree, I tried to get internships because my brother had told me that you need it and it would kind of help you when you graduate to get a job. So I really tried to apply. I wanted to be part of the engineering core program, which is basically they integrate work experiences into your academic journey. But at that time, when as an international student, they had a rule that only a few international students could be part of the co-op. So I believe my first year GPA was, I think, 3.5 or 3.6. But I still didn't get in. But then you had other students that had a GPA of maybe 3.0 or maybe even 2 point something, and they got into the co-op program. And I would apply for jobs. They would ask me, are you in co-op? I would say no, and that was the end. I remember there was this top oil and gas company here in Alberta, and we had kind of been emailing back and forth, like any engineering student would want to work with this company. And then they found out that I wasn't a co-op student, and yeah, that was the end of that opportunity. So for me, it really limited what I had available, I feel. As an international student, you had to kind of look for jobs that were more labor intensive, or maybe like sales associate positions. And it was just like an example where, you know, where a system is, there's like a systemic barrier, right? And it was a bit frustrating. It was a bit frustrating because you had good grades, you're putting in a lot of effort, but the system just didn't allow you. There was like so much you could go further, right? They just put that stop. So that was quite difficult for me. But even with that, I decided, okay, my first job, I would get a sales associate position. I would work in the mall. My friend had told me, okay, start applying in February so that by April, when you finish your exams, you start working. I started applying. I didn't get a job until August. And I remember I went to a mall and I gave them my resume, and they said, oh, you don't have any experience working in this position. And in my mind, I'm like, this is entry level, minimum wage. I think it was like $11.25. And I was like, seriously, you need experience for this. But that was just what I faced until I got a job later on in August. So it was quite difficult even to get an entry-level role. So that was the first job I got here in Canada. My second job was a very labor-intensive job. In fact, I was the first female they hired for that role. And yeah, it's understandable why, because it was very, very physical intensive. Like I was driving forklifts, I was pushing cylinders, and I did it because I kind of just knew where I was going in terms of like I needed that work experience on my resume with the Canadian company, and I didn't want it to be sales associate, so I did it. And I remember I'll get back home, my whole body, like it wasn't even a part of my body, my whole body was in pain. But I pushed through it for 4 months, and I completed it, and yeah, I achieved what I set out to do. So I started applying for jobs in my final year of university. I started really early because, you know, past experiences had taught me a lesson. I started really early, and I started in September of my final year. I got a job in April of the following year, and I was really happy. I was really, really happy, and I started work in May. Now, as an international student, for you to start working, you have to have a work permit. But it does take a while for that to be processed. So when you finish your school, you would apply for your work permit. Usually it takes a couple of months before you get the work permit. But there's something that they call deferred status. So the government says that, okay, as long as you've applied, you're allowed to work, right? But a lot of companies, I say they're not aware of it, but they prefer that you actually have the physical work permit in your hands. So that was something that I was asked for, but you know, luckily for me, the person who, the HR person that hired me, she actually went on maternity leave after, and then they brought a replacement, and the replacement individual was also an immigration consultant. So she literally understood what I was saying. She didn't ask me to bring any proof or try to reach out to IRCC to get a letter, which they wouldn't provide. So she just asked that I just show her proof that I had applied, and I did, and that was it. So that really helped me. 7 months after I started my work, I would say 6 months or so, you know, I was excited, saving money, making money. I had issues with my car, it broke down. I had that fixed. That took basically all my savings, right, that I had made the first 6 months. Then the 7th month, my company were laying off people. They had initially told me that, oh, you know, you're not really affected, because they had different sites that they were working on, and the site I was hired for wasn't part of the sites that were affected by whatever was happening, right? Um, but the day before Christmas, actually, I think it was the 24th of December, they called me and told me that, yeah, unfortunately, I'm being laid off. And, I guess how that goes. But they said something, but we appreciate the experience that basically the work you've done and everything. We understand that you're also a worker because the HR person who was an immigration consultant also made a case for me that, oh, we can't really fire her. She's on a work permit. She needs to be working. So they found another job for me in another site, and that was 2.5 hours from Edmonton. So they offered me the role, and they said I should think about it like over the Christmas break. So I thought about it. Obviously, there was no, I had bills to pay. So I started working in a town called Swan Hills, which was 2.5 hours away. So I was doing a lot of shuttling back and forth from Edmonton to Swan Hills back. And that was quite challenging. Swan Hills is a very small town. So I was very alone. I was very alone. But I was happy that I had a job. I started working in that position, and then the same thing that affected the company in the branch in Edmonton affected the company also in Swan Hills. But I also forgot to mention that when I moved into this role in Swan Hills, they actually kind of demoted me. So I was working like as a lab analyst, but they didn't have like a lab analyst position available. So they only had a lab prep tech, which is like a lower role. So I kind of went down. And then someone left the company, and then later on, like maybe like 5 or 6 months after, I kind of went back to the position that I was working as before. But then they had another layoff. So they had the second layoff, and I was like, okay. I wasn't really too surprised. I won't say I was an expert at that point in time, but I was like, okay, another, it's happening again. They had a second layoff, and they gave us an earlier notice. So they told us like 3 months before that, oh, by the end of the year, unfortunately, they had to cut jobs and everything. So I started applying, for jobs, a lot of jobs. I didn't get them. A week before I was supposed to stop working, they extended my contract for 5 more months. So I was like, okay. So I continued to work for 5 more months, and then I left the company. And then I was unemployed for 4 months. I was on EI. I then decided at that point in time to make that switch to finance, because I had mentioned earlier I didn't really enjoy engineering so much, but I was kind of neck in deep. So I decided to make that change to finance. I took a certificate program in a university here. It was just a short 4-month program in accounting and bookkeeping. I reached out to people who could refer me for a role, and I got someone in my church, in my community actually, who made a referral for a job position, and I got my first job in finance. I remember when I started working, my manager told me that, oh, she actually saw my resume and she actually went past it because she thought I was kind of overqualified for the role, and also because I did a degree in engineering, right? But then when she got the referral from the person who referred me, she kind of had another look and invited me for an interview, and then I got the job. So it's really good. I would say it's very important to have people and always reach out, whenever you need help, always reach out. So I'm very grateful for my journey. A lot has happened, just reflecting, a lot has happened from being an international student, then a worker, a permanent resident, and now I'm a citizen. I got my citizenship earlier on this year, so that was very exciting. And it was like, oh, I'm settled. I'm settled now. I would say one advice that I would have for students would be embracing the Canadian culture. There would be a lot of, I think, misunderstandings just because of the cultural differences, but just being more open to it, being open to the food that you're going to be eating, being open to the people that you're going to meet, and just taking it all in. Try to have a community, of friends outside of your immediate circle. And an advice that I would also give would be try to speak to people about your program, those who have gone through a similar program, just so that you're aware. There are a lot of things in Canada that you would kind of need to do, which would help you along, your career. So when you speak to people and you're aware of it ahead of time, it helps you to be better prepared. So talk to people. I had my brother who had gone through the system, who understood the system. But even if you don't have a family relation, reach out to people who have gone through a similar experience. I would let parents know that it's good when you research or when you know more about the environment that you're sending your child to. There are a lot of differences and nuances, and an example would be getting a diploma here. It's really good. It's very practical. It's an awesome opportunity, but what we refer to as a diploma back home isn't really something to be too proud of, So there are many, and that's just an example, there are many experiences, many opportunities here in Canada. So I would say, parents should learn about it and be open to it, because I would say a degree isn't a straight line. It isn't a straight line to your destination or to your child's destination. Yeah.